Okay, so you're thinking of buying your first home in Zimbabwe.
Congrats, that's huge.
And probably a little daunting, right?
Oh, absolutely.
We've all heard those stories about property disputes and unexpected costs that pop up,
Buying a home anywhere has its challenges,
but Zimbabwe's market has some unique quirks.
which is why we did a deep dive into this podcast from Neville Property Consultants.
They really seem to know their stuff,
Hmm.
and they had some great advice specifically for first-time buyers like you.
They did. And what I appreciate is they don't just throw a bunch of houses at you.
Their very first tip is all about you.
Define your homeownership goals.
See, I love that.
It's not just about finding a place with a nice kitchen. It's about figuring out your why.
Exactly. They
Mhm.
really dig into your motivation.
Are you looking for stability?
Long-term investment, a space to truly make your own.
It's about understanding what you hope to achieve through homeownership.
Right, because that dream home looks different for everyone.
Exactly.
They want you to think about your lifestyle, your future plans.
Do you need extra space for a growing family or maybe a dedicated home office?
Defining those priorities up front makes your search so much more focused.
It's like setting those filters on a shopping app, but for your life.
And speaking of things that can make or break your dreams,
Tip number 2 is all about the money.
establish a realistic budget.
This is where it gets real right.
They are big on having a clear picture of your financial situation before you even think about making an offer.
That means looking at your income expenses, savings, any debts.
And here's where it gets really interesting.
They don't let you forget those hidden costs.
Things like property taxes, insurance, potential maintenance, or renovation costs.
You're right, those can really sneak up on you.
They suggest exploring different mortgage options, interest rates, all that good stuff.
To see what fits your budget.
This is especially crucial in Zimbabwe because of the dual currency system, which we can unpack a bit later.
Oh, good point. I'm already feeling overwhelmed and we're only on tip 2,
Which I guess is a perfect segue to their third tip.
which is to seek expert guidance.
They are, of course, talking about themselves.
But honestly, with the complexities of Zimbabwe's market, I can see why they emphasize this.
Totally. It's like you wouldn't climb Mount Everest without a guide, right?
You need someone who knows the terrain, the pitfalls, all of that.
Exactly.
They have their fingers on the pulse of the market. They understand the legal complexities.
And they can help ensure a smooth, transparent transaction.
Basically, they want to be your advocate every step of the way. So you've got your goals, you've crunched the numbers,
Now comes the exciting part.
actually finding your dream property.
And their fourth tip is all about making sure that dream doesn't turn into a nightmare.
They call it conduct thorough due diligence.
Okay, so we're talking more than just checking for leaky faucets, right?
Like, what does due diligence really mean in the Zimbabwean context?
It's about becoming a property detective.
They really emphasize researching different neighborhoods, not just looking at houses in isolation.
Which makes sense.
Because a beautiful house in the wrong location is not going to make you happy.
Exactly. Think about proximity to schools, healthcare shopping.
Even those nice parks for your weekend relaxation.
It's about picturing your daily life, not just the house itself.
So you're saying I should be checking bus routes, grocery store options, all that good stuff.
Absolutely.
And then once you've found some promising properties,
They advise a thorough inspection.
and here's a key insight.
They don't just stop at a home inspector.
They actually recommend engaging a surveyor as well.
See, now that's something I wouldn't have thought of.
I mean, why a surveyor?
Isn't the home inspector enough to assess the property's condition?
The home inspector is great for the house itself.
Checking the structure and all the systems.
The surveyor, they delve into the boundaries and legal aspects of the property.
Ah, so we're talking about making sure that beautiful garden you love isn't actually on your neighbor's land.
Exactly.
They'll be able to tell you if your neighbor's fence is encroaching or if there are any easements you need to know about.
This is particularly crucial in Zimbabwe, where land tenure can be complex.
You want to avoid inheriting any boundary disputes or legal issues down the line.
Okay, wow, that's a pro tip right there.
So due diligence is really about making sure you know exactly what you're buying, both in terms of the house and the land.
Precisely. It's about minimizing your risk and ensuring a sound investment,
And that brings us to their final piece of advice.
which is don't rush the process.
Oh, I like the sound of that.
In this fast-paced world, it's easy to get caught up in the excitement and feel pressured to make a quick decision,
Especially in a competitive market.
like you often see in certain segments in Zimbabwe.
Yeah, you don't want to miss out on your dream home because you were hesitant.
But at the same time, you don't want to rush into a decision you regret. They
Exactly.
encourage you to take your time, explore all your options.
Ask questions.
Lots of them.
Don't be afraid to ask for clarification on anything that's unclear.
And never feel pressured to make a hasty choice.
It's like they're saying, channel your inner toddler and just keep asking why until you're satisfied.
Essentially, yes.
But, with a bit more tact.
They are professionals after all.
Of course, of course.
So to sum up their advice, it seems like they're really big on thorough research planning and taking your time to make the right decision.
Which honestly makes total sense, especially given some of the complexities of the Zimbabwe market we've touched on.
Absolutely.
And that actually brings up a really important point.
While these tips are valuable for any first-time homebuyer anywhere in the world,
They're particularly relevant in a market like Zimbabwe's.
which has its own unique nuances and dynamics.
Okay, so we're talking about Zimbabwe's unique market dynamics.
What exactly makes it different from, say, buying a house in a more established market?
Well, for one, Zimbabwe has this dual currency system.
You've got both the US dollar and the Zimbabwean dollar floating around.
Right, I remember you mentioning that earlier.
I bet that adds a whole other layer of complexity when you're trying to figure out what you can afford.
It really does.
It impacts everything,
Pricing mortgages.
even just understanding the true value of a property.
So how do you even begin to wrap your head around that?
Like if I'm looking at a house, is the price listed in US dollars or Zimbabwean dollars?
And how do I know if I'm getting a fair deal with all that fluctuation?
That's where having a local expert like Neville Property Consultants really proves invaluable.
They're deep in the trenches of this market every day.
They can advise you on which currency makes the most sense for different parts of the purchase.
Help you find a mortgage with favorable terms, and even guide you on making competitive offers in a market that can be quite active.
It's like they're not just real estate agents, but also your personal finance gurus.
It's like a 2-for-1 deal.
Ha, in a way, yeah.
They really understand the financial pulse of the Zimbabwean market.
And then on top of the currency complexities,
You've got the legal framework surrounding property ownership in Zimbabwe, which has its own quirks.
oh, right, you mentioned different types of land tenure.
What's that all about? Is that something I need to be worried about?
It's definitely something to be aware of.
Essentially, land tenure refers to the way you own the land and the rights that come with that ownership,
In Zimbabwe, there are different systems in place.
which can determine things like how long you own the land for, whether you can pass it down to your heirs, or even what you're allowed to do with it.
Wow, see, I had no idea. This is why I'm glad we're doing this deep dive.
It's essential information for sure.
And it's another area where Neville Property Consultants really emphasizes due diligence.
They recommend engaging professionals like lawyers specializing in property law.
Who can walk you through all the intricacies and ensure your investment is secure.
That makes sense.
I mean, we're talking about potentially the biggest purchase of your life. You want to make sure all your bases are covered legally and financially.
Exactly.
It's about peace of mind and knowing you're protected.
This has been so insightful.
We've covered so much ground, from defining your why to navigating the ins and outs of the Zimbabwean market.
It feels like we've equipped our listener with a solid foundation,
I hope so. Knowledge is power.
especially when you're making a significant decision like buying a home.
Absolutely.
And while we've touched on a lot of practical advice thanks to Neville Property Consultants,
There's one final thought I'd love to leave our listener with.
go for it.
They've focused a lot on the logistical and financial side of buying a house.
Which is obviously crucial.
But there's also the emotional aspect.
You're not just buying a building, you're creating a home.
You're right.
That's a whole other deep dive waiting to happen.
Exactly. So as you're going through this process, dear listener, remember to also think about those personal touches, the memories you'll create, the feeling you want your home to evoke.
How will you transform this house into a space that truly reflects who you are? Something to ponder as you embark on this exciting journey.